Hi everyone, I'm Shelly from There's No Place Like Home at redheadmom8.wordpress.com. As a mom of 11, it took me quite a bit of time to actually find some hacks that helped us to homeschool multiple children without me going absolutely crazy. So today, that's what I'm going to share with you. I just wanted to share some ideas for you, some tricks on how to homeschool a bunch of kids. Okay, now first of all, I think it is so important that I point out to you that the one thing that is going to give you the most trouble homeschooling a large number of children is if you continue to have that school mindset of separate subjects and separate grade levels. I cannot even reiterate to you how important it is that you need to just press all of those ideas of what education has to look like to the side, especially if you are a mom of many or a homeschool dad of many, because you've got a lot on your plate. And you know, I actually started out with that mindset. I started out trying to make my own homeschool look like a classroom. And you know, even now, my mom, she loves to tell people that I homeschool. And even just the other day at the bank, she was telling the teller, she said, my daughter's a teacher. She teaches her kids at home. And you know, I love that my mom enjoys the fact that I homeschool, but just being called the teacher, it kind of, I don't like when people refer to me that way, not because I have anything against teachers, but because I think that it gives people the wrong idea of what homeschooling actually is. But yeah, when I first started homeschooling, I really did think of myself as more of a teacher. We had a little classroom and a blackboard, and my kids all had their own books. They all learned. They were supposed to learn independently, but what ended up happening was I was having to run from one child to the next, helping them because they were still pretty young. And, you know, that is really what ended up leading me to burnout, because I was trying, you know, I was brand new to homeschooling, and right off from the very beginning, I was homeschooling 4 kids. And 3 of them were pretty young. 1 of them was a high schooler. And I didn't know, you know, what other ways homeschooling could look. Even though people had offered to let me come in and see what their homeschools looked like, I didn't take them up on the offer. I wish that I would have, you know, because I found out that they were using 5 in a row and were very, you know, like literature-based homeschoolers. And I think that that really would have helped me. But me, you know, with my whole, oh, I know everything mindset, I thought, oh, I don't need to go in and watch. I know what school looks like. And that's exactly what I did. And it was really, really hard, because what ended up happening was again, my kids had all these different books for all these different subjects. And since my kids are different ages, you know, I don't have multiples, so they were all in different grades. I wasn't doing anything really together with my kids other than like art and music and gym, which consisted of going to the playground across the street from our house. And, you know, after a while, it really started to just drain all of us, because we were spending so much time doing our homeschool days, because my kids would have to wait for me to get from one child to the next, you know. So if one child would need my help, I would most likely be helping another one first, so then they would have to sit and wait for me, and then I would jump over to that child, and then another child would inevitably end up needing help. And that is really what our days looked like every single day. And yeah, that is a huge part of why I ended up sending my kids back to school for 2 years, because I didn't know of any other way to homeschool. I was trying to do too much, and I just kept picturing the idea of a classroom in my head. And I was not thinking about the fact that nowadays, now this wasn't true for one-room schoolhouses, but nowadays, school classrooms, everyone is in the same grade. Everyone is not, I don't want to say all on the same level, but generally speaking, they're around the same level. And that's not like that when you're homeschooling multiple children. Because, you know, when you're a homeschool parent, your kids are it's not only multiple children, it's multiple ages, meaning multiple levels. So it's not going to look like a classroom classroom setting anyway, and it shouldn't. It should not look like it. Again, I just really want to point that out. You want to keep the home in your homeschool. Such an important thing for you to remember. But anyway, so I've rambled on a bit about why I've decided to share this with you and what not to do. And again, what I'm telling you not to do is try to look at your kids as your very own classroom, because that is just going to make things 10 times harder for you. And homeschooling can be so enjoyable if you just find a routine that really works. And you know what? The very, very biggest thing that you can do as a homeschooling parent of many is to teach your children together as much as possible. And again, you know that's not going to happen if you keep looking at this mindset of different grade levels. Different kids have to learn things in different grades. It's not like that at all. Now, yes, there are certain subject areas that kids are better off doing on their own, especially math. Language arts, if they're younger and are first learning how to read and write, then yes, that's definitely something that they should do on their own level. But, you know, for the most part, science and history and social studies, they are all topics that can be learned together as a group, and that's what I'm going to share a bit about with you today, are just some ways that you can do that to kind of keep your kids together rather than having to do everyone individually. So the first way is with unit studies, and I have done several videos on unit studies. If you haven't seen any of them, I'll just give you a quick synopsis of what they are. Unit studies, they are cross-curricular. So they usually will be centered around a certain topic or sometimes around a book, for example. And what they are is they are usually activities that cover all different subject areas that all different ages can do together. And this is something that is such a huge help, because not only are you able to keep your kids together to learn, letting go of teaching all of the subjects separately is just like such a huge relief. It's like just this huge burden that is left off of your shoulders, and that is what unit studies do. So again, they take a particular topic and they will look at that one topic from many different aspects. So for example, if your children are learning about pirates, okay, they will learn, of course, history with pirates, where they came from. That would be geography. They would even learn sometimes, you know, what sorts of clothing they wore, what you know, like their little swords were, those cutlasses, but they would learn right there as vocabulary. Very often you can talk about the types of food that a lot of pirates ate, especially while they were out to sea. So right there would be life skills. And then just things like tying knots, those would be life skills also. And there would also be different ways to work science into that also. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but the point is that life as it happens is not broken into subject. There is not a single topic out there that is not going to naturally cover all of the subject areas. That's why it is so unnecessary that we adults seem to think that we have to break everything into unrelated subjects, when it is so much easier for kids to retain information if they're covering all of these subjects all about the same topic. You know, it has a more holistic feel to it. It is just something that is more natural, because again, we don't break our lives apart into subjects. So again, unit studies are definitely something that you can do with a group of children of different ages. And again, for the most part, yes, you will most likely be doing math separately, and you will most likely be doing language arts separately. But what a big difference from going from trying to teach all of your kids separately to, just having to do those two areas separately, and then doing everything else together: history, science, art, health, music, anything that would, be covered in that particular unit study, or sometimes they're called thematic units. Thematic units. So that's really something that you should look into. And, I know that some of you are probably thinking, but what about, if I have, say, a 7-year-old working with a 10-year-old? The nice thing about unit studies is that you can tweak them a little bit, just make things a little bit harder for your older kids or a little bit easier for your younger kids. And, Another thing with unit studies is that you do not have to do every single activity that is offered to you in a unit study. Now, I'm speaking of pre-written unit studies, like CONUS, or I have unit studies that I have written. There are unit studies, I think, Weaver curriculum. But anyway, yeah, I'm speaking of pre-written unit studies that are already done for you. You do not have to do all of the activities that they suggest for you. The nice thing about unit studies is that you can choose the things that your children will be interested in, that they will be capable of, and that things that you yourself as the parent will not mind doing. Because, you know, some of us don't really like doing all those Pinterest-worthy, beautiful projects. I'm one of them. I'm all about simplicity just because I have a huge family. And yeah, there are times that I will delve into something a little bit more intricate. For example, we did a medieval feast years ago, which involved a lot of cooking and a lot of preparation, a lot of practice. That was a lot of fun though. But I did that because I knew that it was something that my kids would really enjoy, and it was something that I knew that I personally could handle. So that's another nice thing about unit studies, is that you, the parent, can choose what you need to do. And it doesn't matter how many things you do. It doesn't matter how many things you skip. It's all up to you. You know what your kids can handle. So that's one idea. So now another idea for teaching kids together is by reading aloud to them. And you know, I am huge with literature-based learning. It is such a nice bonding experience for you to sit and read with your kids. And you know, this is one of those nice things that, especially history, is awesome. Learning history is awesome with literature-based learning, because there are so many great historical fictions out there, biographies, autobiographies, even a lot of the, I call them trade books. Now at the library they'd be called nonfiction books. A lot of those books are also things that you could read out loud to your kids. And yes, they are books that your kids of different ages can learn together, because since you are reading aloud to the kids, your younger kids, you know, you don't have to worry that they're not going to be able to understand the vocabulary, or that they're not going to understand what's going on. Because very often what happens with your read aloud books is that if your younger kids don't completely understand everything of something that is a little bit more advanced, you know what? It is fantastic that they can grasp anything at all. And that's what will usually happen, is that they will retain the things that are more appropriate to their level. And you know, you can even boost that even more by doing things like oral narrations with your kids. You know, stopping in the middle of a book every once in a while and just asking your kids to tell back what it is that they remember. Okay? And all of these hacks that I'm telling you today, I do have separate videos on each one that I will link in the description box in case you want a closer look at how to actually do these. I'm kind of just hitting the surface for you today to give you ideas. So yes, reading aloud with your kids is an easy and a fun way to cover history. And again, oral narrations, sometimes even written narrations, so that your kids can demonstrate that they remember what was read, or that they were listening, or that they comprehended what was read. And you know, you could even turn that into a notebooking page. And that's another thing that my kids really enjoyed doing together, is I would read aloud to them and then they would do a notebooking page. And it didn't always have to be a written narration. Sometimes it could be, you know, like they would do a character sketch. Sometimes they might do a comic strip of a scene that happened in the story that day. Other times they might do a really detailed illustration that showed something specific that happened. And that is something that I always told my kids, is that their notebooking pages had to show me that they understood what was read, and again, that they were listening. So read alouds are another way to teach a group of kids together that are of different levels. Now science, you can also cover science with read alouds too, especially if you're doing biographies or nonfiction books. But another great idea for science is hands-on experiments with a group of kids. You know, there are so many fantastic experiments, like you can find them right on YouTube. I think it's Steve Spangler experiments. So many great ideas. There are library books that have different experiments that you can do with just like things that you have around the house. What is it called? Like kitchen-based science experiments. These are all fun things. And yeah, my kids enjoy doing these things together, using the baking soda and the vinegar to create volcanoes. And they didn't just do the eruption. They like went full out and made their own Play-Doh, and then they made their own volcano, painted it, and then did the eruption. So this is something that kids can really have a fun time doing together. And again, you're getting all of these subjects covered with one group rather than having to hop from child to child. Okay? Now, another idea is to just have your kids, again, do what I call the 3 R's. Reading, writing, and arithmetic. Well, I don't just call them the 3 R's. Lots of people call them the 3 R's. I didn't come up with it. But the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. And I mentioned earlier that is something that most kids should do individually. Like that's something that they would probably do at their own level, especially with language arts if they are younger and are just learning how to read and how to write. So what you could also do is just have your kids individually do the 3 R's and then just let them do self-directed learning the rest of the day. And this is something that really is going to require you to just completely throw your idea of what school is supposed to look like out the window, because this is all about trusting your kids and trusting in their curiosity, trusting in their innate ability to learn things on their own. Because, even we adults understand that we will always remember things better when we're actually interested in them. Even as adults, if someone is trying to give us information that we really don't care about, we really don't want to know, it's not something that we're going to retain even as adults. But if it is something that we are independently wanting to find out more about, or if it's something that we know we have to find out about because it's something that's going to help us in some way, yeah, those are the things that are going to stick with us. And kids are no different. So I just want you to remember that. And I do have some videos on self-directed learning. It's also called interest-led learning. Sometimes it might be called delight-directed learning. But that is another way that you can homeschool a large group of kids without, again, feeling like you're going to lose your mind and like you have to send them to school because you just can't do it all. I know what it's like. I have been there. That's why I'm so passionate about this. I'm trying to help anyone that I can to not go through what I went through, because those 2 years that my kids were back in school, they were awful for me. They were awful for the kids. Our family itself, it was just not a good time for us. So bringing my kids back out of school after I had realized that things had to change, it has made such a wonderful difference in our home life. Now, I think there's only one more thing that I wanted to share with you, and that is that if you happen to have a large family, like some people consider 3 or 4 kids a large family, but I'm talking like a large family. Like I have 11 kids. There are people who have more kids than I do, or even right now I'm only homeschooling 8. And even for me, homeschooling all 8 of my kids at once would be too hard for me. And I know you're saying, but you're telling us to teach them all together. Yes, that's because most of you, I'm assuming, will probably have, when I say multiple kids, I'm thinking probably 3 or 4 kids is usually like what most of you will have. I'm not guessing that a lot of you are going to have as many kids as I do. But if you do, sometimes you might find that if you do have a larger number of children, like 8, or even like 6, you might need to break them up into like 2 or 3 separate groups to make things a little bit easier for you. And then you can teach those particular groups together using the same tips that I shared earlier, with the unit studies or with the read alouds and the hands-on experiments or the self-directed learning. But you might want to just do it in like 2 or 3 groups rather than trying to do it all together. Because what I found, I tried that. I think at the time I was trying to do 7 kids at once, and it was tough. And it was just back to me feeling like I was bouncing from one child to the next. And even though we were doing activities together, it wasn't like they weren't learning all different things. It was still at the point where we were doing things that they would occasionally need my help. And yeah, even though everybody was doing the same thing, I still felt like I I didn't have enough arms, you know? So what I found was that if I broke my kids into groups of maybe like 3 or 4 kids in each group, it made things so much more manageable for me. So if you do have like an extra large family, that is something else that I definitely want to recommend that you try. So anyway, I hope that these tips have helped you today. Again, I do have individual videos on each of the ideas that I shared with you today. So I will link all of those down in the description box below. And I also have a video on doing read alouds with notebooking. So I'll leave that here too. And if you have any questions or comments, you can leave one down below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon page, I would love for you to see what rewards I have for my patrons there. And I hope you have a great day.